I'm Summer, 33, female. I live in a quiet suburban town that's just close enough to the city for my job at the Central Weather Station. My life, until recently, was as predictable as the high-pressure systems I love to track, stable, sunny, and calm. My wife, Ava, an event planner, was the vibrant, outgoing force to my more reserved, analytical nature, and for 7 years, our home was a sanctuary from the world's storms. But I was about to learn that the most devastating storms aren't the ones you see on a radar. They're the ones that build silently within your own four walls. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Life had a rhythm, a comfortable cadence that I mistook for permanence. Our mornings were a synchronized dance of coffee, hurried kisses, and promises of dinner together. I'd head to the station, losing myself in Doppler radar displays and atmospheric pressure charts, while Ava would be on her phone constantly, coordinating with vendors, clients, and venues. Her job was her passion, she said, a whirlwind of creativity and social engagement that I, in my quiet world of data and forecasts, deeply admired. I saw her dedication as a part of the ambitious, driven woman I fell in love with. The late nights, the last-minute weekend trips for venue scouting, the endless networking dinners, I filed them all under the category of career, building, the necessary sacrifices for the life we were building together. Our friends, especially my best friend Maya, often commented on how perfect we were. "You two are a perfect balance," Maya would say over our weekly coffee dates. "You're the calm, steady anchor, and she's the brilliant, beautiful sail." I believed it. I loved being her anchor. I loved the way she'd come home, smelling of expensive perfume and champagne, and tell me all about the lavish parties she was planning. It felt like I had a window into a world far more glamorous than my own. I was proud of her, proud of the empire she was building. Looking back, I see the warning signs, the subtle shifts in atmospheric pressure that I was too blind, or perhaps too trusting, to notice. There was the constant, almost obsessive way she guarded her phone, angling it away from me whenever a notification buzzed. There were the hushed, hurried conversations she'd take in another room, always ending with a clipped, "Okay, I'll talk to you later." When I'd ask who it was, the answer was always the same: a demanding client, a difficult vendor, a stressed-out assistant. The explanations were always plausible, always delivered with a tired sigh that made me feel guilty for even asking. The week it all fell apart began like any other. Ava was in the final stages of planning a massive corporate gala for a luxury hotel chain. The stress was palpable. She was more distant than usual, her smiles strained, her touch fleeting. "It's the final push, she'd said, kissing my forehead before heading out for another late night. "Just a few more days of this madness, and then I'm all yours. We'll take that trip to the coast we talked about." I held onto that promise like a lifeline. It was a beacon of sunshine in what had become a strangely overcast period in our marriage. That Friday night, she had the gala itself. She left the house in a stunning black dress, her hair perfectly styled, looking every bit the successful, confident woman she was. "Don't wait up for me," she said, her hand already on the doorknob. "It's going to be a very, very long night. I'll probably just crash at a hotel downtown to be closer to the venue for the morning after tear. Down." It wasn't the first time she'd done this for a big event, so I didn't question it. I just smiled, told her to break a leg, and settled in for a quiet night of tracking a developing low-pressure system off the coast. The irony wasn't lost on me. The house felt cavernously empty that night. I tried to lose myself in my work, projecting storm paths and analyzing wind speeds, but my focus kept drifting. I'd glance at the clock, then at my phone, expecting a text, a quick good night, or an update on how the event was going. Nothing came. By midnight, I sent a simple message: "Hope the gala is a huge success. Thinking of you." I watched the screen for the little delivered sign to turn into read. It never did. I told myself she was busy. Of course, she was busy. She was running a massive event. Her phone was probably in her purse, forgotten in the chaos of managing hundreds of guests, staff, and a demanding client. I tried to sleep, but the silence in our bed was a roaring void. I kept reaching for her side, my hand meeting only cold, empty sheets. An unfamiliar anxiety, a cold and prickling thing, began to creep up my spine. This felt different from her other late nights. There was a stillness, a lack of connection that felt less like professional preoccupation and more like a deliberate severing. I tossed and turned for hours, my mind a whirlwind of irrational fears. What if something had happened, a car accident, a medical emergency? I scrolled through local news sites, my heart pounding with every headline. Nothing. I checked her social media. Nothing since a post that afternoon showing off the ballroom. At around 3 a.m., I finally drifted into a restless, dream-filled sleep, the kind that offers no rest at all. I woke up on Saturday morning to the gray light of dawn filtering through the blinds and the stark, undeniable reality that Ava had never come home. I checked my phone immediately. My message from last night was still there, unread. There were no missed calls, no new texts. Panic began to set in, sharp and cold. This wasn't right. Even if she stayed at a hotel, she would have checked in. She would have let me know she was safe. My first instinct was to call her, but a voice in the back of my head, a nascent whisper of doubt, stopped me. What if there was a simple explanation? What if she was exhausted and her phone had died, and I was about to make a fool of myself by panicking? I decided to wait. I made coffee, my hands shaking slightly. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator, sounded amplified, unnatural. The hours ticked by with agonizing slowness. 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m. The knot in my stomach tightened with each passing minute. This was no longer just unusual, it was deeply, fundamentally wrong. My mind raced through a Rolodex of possibilities, each one darker than the last. I was just about to dial her number, my thumb hovering over the call button, when my phone buzzed on the table. My heart leaped with a confusing mix of relief and dread. It was a text, but it wasn't from Ava. It was from a number I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I opened it. The message contained only 3 things: a screenshot, a short sentence, and a hotel room number. The screenshot was of an Instagram story. It was a picture of 2 champagne glasses clinked together in a toast. In the background, out of focus but still recognizable, was the distinctive pattern of the headboard from our spare bedroom. The caption on the story read, "Celebrating a successful night with my favorite person." The account name was David H38. The sentence below the screenshot was simple and brutal. "Thought you should know who your wife is really celebrating with." And beneath that, Grand Lux Hotel, room 1201. The air left my lungs in a single, painful gasp. I stared at the message, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. The headboard, it was unmistakable. I had spent a week assembling that bed myself. David, who was David, the hotel name, Grand Lux. That was the chain Ava was supposedly working with, room 1201. It was all too specific, too detailed to be a prank. My world, which had felt so stable just hours before, tilted violently on its axis. The predictable weather patterns of my life had just been shattered by a Category 5 hurricane I never saw coming. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The coffee in my stomach churned. I stumbled to the sink, my body shaking uncontrollably. This couldn't be real. There had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding, but deep down in the pit of my stomach I knew. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the emotional distance. It all clicked into place with a sickening finality. It wasn't a demanding client. It wasn't a difficult vendor. It was David. I read the message again and again, the words burning themselves into my memory. "Thought you should know. Who sent this?" A disgruntled colleague. A friend of this David person. It didn't matter. What mattered was the information. Ava wasn't at a hotel downtown because she was tired from the gala. She was at the Grand Lux in room 1201 with someone named David. A cold, hard fury began to replace the shock. It was an anger so pure and so intense it felt like ice in my veins. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with was a liar, and she was currently, at this very moment, with another man. The urge to call her, to scream, to demand an explanation was overwhelming. But then another thought, sharp and clear, cut through the rage. What would that accomplish? She would deny it. She would lie, just as she had clearly been lying for weeks, maybe months, maybe even years. I needed proof. I needed undeniable, irrefutable proof before I confronted her. The anonymous text was a starting point, a map to the heart of the storm, and I, a meteorologist who spent her life tracking and predicting storms, was going to track this one down to its very source. My shaking stopped. The nausea subsided, replaced by a steely resolve. I saved the screenshot. I saved the phone number. I took a deep, steadying breath. Ava had no idea that her secret world was about to be exposed. She thought she was safe in her lie, celebrating her successful night. But the forecast had changed, a storm was coming, and I was going to be the one to unleash it. My mind, accustomed to processing complex data and finding patterns, went into overdrive. The name David H38 was my first clue. A quick search on social media yielded a public profile, David Heller, 38. His profile picture showed a handsome, confident man in a sharp suit. His bio read, Regional Manager at Grand Lux Hotels. It was him. The client, Ava, wasn't just planning an event for the hotel. She was sleeping with its manager. I scrolled through his photos, my stomach twisting with each one. Pictures of him on lavish vacations, at expensive dinners, and there, in a group photo from a team-building event. 3 months ago was Ava. She was standing next to him, her hand on his arm, her smile brighter and more unguarded than any I had seen from her in a long time. They looked comfortable, familiar. This wasn't new. This had been happening right under my nose. The anonymous texter was a loose end, a variable I couldn't account for. Who were they, and why did they want me to know? I sent a cautious reply to the unknown number. Who is this? The response came back almost instantly. A ghost, just be at the hotel. It was cryptic and unsettling, but it confirmed that this was not a random act. Someone inside their circle knew and wanted me to act. The knowledge was both terrifying and empowering. I wasn't just stumbling in the dark. I had an unseen ally. My next move was critical. I couldn't just storm into the hotel. I needed a plan, a strategy. I called Maya, my voice surprisingly calm as I asked her to come over. When she arrived, she took one look at my face and knew something was terribly wrong. I showed her the text. I showed her David's profile. I laid out the whole sordid discovery on our coffee table. Maya's reaction was everything I needed it to be. Immediate, unwavering loyalty. Her face hardened, her usual gentle expression replaced by a protective fury. That absolute snake, she breathed, her eyes blazing. Summer, what are we going to do? Breathed, her eyes blazing. Summer, what are we going to do? The we was the most comforting word I had ever heard. I wasn't alone in this. I'm not confronting her yet. I said, my voice steady. I need more than a screenshot. I need undeniable proof. I'm going to the hotel. Meyer immediately shook her head. No, you're not going alone. I'm coming with you. We decided on a course of action. We wouldn't go to the room, not yet. That was too risky, too direct. Instead, we would go to the hotel and observe. We needed to confirm they were there together. We needed to be smart. Before we left, I did something that felt both methodical and deeply painful. I went into our home office and accessed our shared finances. I had always left the finances to Ava. She was better with numbers, she'd said. As I opened the statements, the full scope of her deception began to unfold. Credit card bills filled with charges I didn't recognize, expensive dinners for two at restaurants we'd never been to, charges from high-end clothing stores where she hadn't shopped for me, and then, the final blow, a recurring monthly charge for a storage unit across town. Why would Ava need a secret storage unit? The answer was as obvious as it was devastating. She was building another life, a life that didn't include me. She was siphoning our shared money to fund her affair. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It was financial, a systematic plundering of the future we were supposed to be building together. Each transaction was a lie, each receipt a piece of the puzzle I was now assembling. The rage I felt earlier was now a cold, calculating anger. This wasn't just a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a long-term, calculated campaign of deceit. Ava hadn't just cheated, she had fundamentally betrayed every vow, every promise, every shared dream we ever had. Armed with this new, damning information, Meyer and I drove to the Grand Lux Hotel. The plan was no longer just about getting proof for a confrontation. It was about gathering the evidence I would need to protect myself, to dismantle the life she had built on a foundation of lies. The storm I was tracking was bigger than I ever imagined, and I was heading directly into its path. The Grand Lux Hotel was an imposing tower of glass and steel, a monument to the kind of wealth and power Ava had always been drawn to. Sitting in Maya's car in the parking garage, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing someone else's life fall apart. We didn't have to wait long. About an hour after we arrived, the elevator doors opened and they walked out. Ava and David. He had his arm draped casually around her shoulders, and she was laughing, her head thrown back in a way I hadn't seen in years. They looked happy, relaxed, like a real couple. The sight was a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. It was one thing to see the evidence on a screen. It was another to see it in living, breathing color. Maya reached over and squeezed my hand, her presence a silent anchor in my swirling vortex of pain and anger. They got into a sleek, black sedan, his car, I presumed, and drove away. My first instinct was to follow them, but Maya stopped me. No, Summer, we know where they're going. My eyes widened in realization. The storage unit. We drove to the address from the credit card statement. It was a sterile, anonymous facility on the industrial side of town. Using the gate code I'd found in a notebook in Ava's desk drawer, labeled innocuously as work contacts, we gained entry. Finding the specific unit was easy. There was only one listed under her name. I stood before the cold, metal door of Unit 237, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had a key from her spare set, the one she thought I'd forgotten about. With a deep breath, I slid it into the lock and turned. The door rolled up with a loud groan, revealing the secret life of my wife. It wasn't just a storage unit. It was a fully furnished apartment. A small but well-appointed space with a bed, a small kitchen, even a closet full of clothes. Men's and women's. It was their love nest, the place she went during her late nights and networking dinners. On the small dining table were 2 plates from last night's dinner, candles burned down to nubs, and an empty bottle of expensive wine. On the nightstand, next to the neatly made bed, was a framed photo. It was of her and David kissing on a beach. I felt nothing. The pain and shock had been cauterized, burned away by the white-hot fury that now consumed me. This level of deception was psychopathic. She hadn't just cheated. She had built a completely separate, parallel life, funded by our joint account. This wasn't an affair. It was an exit strategy. Maya began taking pictures of everything with her phone. The clothes, the photo, the bills on the counter addressed to Ava at this address. Every photo was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. As I stood there, surveying the wreckage, I knew what I had to do. This couldn't end with a screaming match. It couldn't end with her tears and fake apologies. This had to be a controlled demolition. I was going to dismantle her life with the same precision and calculation she had used to dismantle mine. We locked the unit, leaving everything exactly as we had found it, and drove away. The first call I made was to Lena, a lawyer friend of mine from college. I explained the situation in cold, emotionless detail. Lena was horrified but immediately switched into professional mode. Do not talk to her, she instructed firmly. Do not let her know you know anything. We need to move fast. Freeze the joint accounts, secure your personal assets, and I will start drafting the divorce papers. We are going to hit her with everything at once. My next calls were to our mortgage company and utility providers, changing all the passwords and putting security alerts on the accounts. I methodically and emotionlessly began to cut Ava out of the life she had so carelessly betrayed. I was no longer the grieving wife. I was a force of nature, a cold front moving in with unstoppable force. The forecast for Ava's future was about to become very, very stormy. Ava came home on Sunday evening, looking tired but strangely happy. The mask of stress from the gala was gone. She walked in, dropped her overnight bag on the floor, and smiled at me. I am so glad that's over, she said, trying to kiss me. I turned my head, and her lips met my cheek. She frowned, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. Tough weekend. I kept my face a neutral mask. You could say that. I let her chatter on about the event, a string of elaborate lies about demanding guests and last-minute crises. I listened, my silence a stark contrast to her bubbly narrative. Each lie she told was another drop of fuel on the fire of my resolve. I waited until she had settled on the couch with a glass of wine before I made my move. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply walked over to the coffee table and placed a single piece of paper in front of her. It was a printout of the bank statement with all the charges for the storage unit, their apartment highlighted in yellow. Her smile froze, the color drained from her face. She looked from the paper to me, her eyes wide with panic. I don't know what this is, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Oh, I think you do, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I believe it's for Unit 237. Does that sound right? Her composure shattered. Tears welled in her eyes. Tears of panic, not remorse. Summer, it's not what you think. I can explain. Can you? I asked, my voice laced with ice. Can you explain the apartment? Can you explain the clothes, the furniture, the framed photo of you and David kissing on the beach? Her jaw dropped. She stared at me, speechless. The full weight of her exposure was finally crashing down on her. I continued, my voice never rising, but each word landing like a hammer blow. While you were working, I was busy too. I spoke with a lawyer. The divorce papers will be served tomorrow. Our joint accounts have been frozen. I've already spoken to the mortgage company. Your name will be removed from the house." She started to sob, the pathetic, theatrical sobs of someone who has been caught. "You can't do this. We can fix this. It was a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash, Ava," I said, standing up. "Building a separate life with another man using our money is not a mistake. It's a choice, and now you get to live with the consequences of that choice." I walked to the front door and opened it. "Your bag is already packed. I suggest you go to your other home. I'm sure David is waiting for you." She looked at me, her face a mess of tears and disbelief. She had expected a fight, a screaming match, a chance to manipulate her way out of it. She had not expected this, cold, swift, and absolute annihilation. She stumbled out the door, her sobs echoing in the quiet street. I closed the door behind her, the click of the lock sounding like the final, definitive end to a chapter of my life. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt quiet. The storm had passed. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings. Ava, through her lawyer, tried to fight for the house, for spousal support, for half of everything. But Lena was brilliant. We had the evidence, the bank statements, the photos from the apartment, even sworn affidavits from 2 of Ava's former colleagues who knew about the affair and were tired of her lies. The anonymous texter, it turned out, was one of them. A junior event planner Ava had treated horribly. She had sent the text out of a sense of justice for me and revenge for herself. Ava's professional life crumbled alongside her personal one. When the details of her affair with a key client's manager came to light, she was fired. David was also let go for his breach of conduct. They were left with nothing but each other and the mountain of debt they had accrued. I, on the other hand, began to heal. The house that had once felt so empty now felt peaceful. It was mine. I filled the silence not with sadness, but with music, with the sound of my own laughter, with long phone calls with Maya. I reconnected with old friends, took up hiking, and poured my energy into my work, earning a promotion to lead forecaster at the station. One morning, about 6 months after it all ended, I was standing on my porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and pink. The air was cool and crisp, a perfect high-pressure system settling over the region. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "I know this is random, but I'm so sorry. I ruined everything. I hope one day you can forgive me." It was Ava. I looked at the message for a long moment, then at the rising sun. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who was so trusting, so blind. I thought about the storm I had weathered, a storm that had torn my life down to its foundations. But like any storm, it had also cleared the air, washed away the debris, and left behind a clean slate. I didn't need to forgive her to move on. Her apology wasn't for me, it was for her. I deleted the message without replying. I took a deep breath of the fresh morning air and smiled. The forecast for my future was clear, calm, and filled with unlimited sunshine. And for the first time in a very long time, I was excited to see what the new day would bring.